to. I mean, this is the intro to Snowflake and a few new features for the folks who might have been a little bit more involved. We see that often when we talk to other folks who have been with Snowflake like early on. They might not know some of the new features that are around. So don't be shy. Experience, okay. Okay, awesome. No, thanks for the honesty and the candor. Appreciate that. Hey, we all got started at some point, right? So we're all, as my son says, as he plays Roblox, we're all noobs at one point. So, all right. Well, let's go and get started. And we'll also talk and wrap up with some open discussion and then talk about next events. I know how it is. It's a virtual event. Sometimes it's hard unclicking that mute button because you're multitasking, and that is okay. So let's talk about what Snowflake is. But what I like to do is talk about really what Snowflake solves. And I think Snowflake solves this historical data wrangling problem, getting the data from many different disparate sources into a place where you can have data consumers or data workers actually use that data and turn it into information. And so it's that type of thing that's made Snowflake very, very popular. And I think it's also enabled them to adopt a lot of customers who are coming from legacy systems, especially on-premise, with the infinite scale that Snowflake offers. So I think one of the key things of the problem it solves, again, is getting all the data into one place in a fairly optimized, fairly straightforward manner. They've done a great job not only providing the data storage and the processing capability, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but they've also provided the tools that basically would have otherwise been either custom developed or been at perhaps a larger expense for some organizations, the tools to get the data in and move the data around. Whether they've adopted a extract, load, transform methodology or an extract, transform, load methodology. And we can talk more about methodologies if you guys like. But and then the other key thing is kind of taking this data lake concept. We like to call it, more of a data lake house, but using things like Apache Spark, bringing that into, your favorite flavor of like modeling the data, and then really allowing all the buzzwords, to do their work these days, right? Your analytics engineers, your data scientists, your data engineers, to do their work and bring that data into information from all the other sources, and hopefully all now residing inside of Snowflake. So that's been critical to Snowflake's success. And so again, if I think about what it is, there's probably 4 fundamentals I think we look at Snowflake as having, and those are data ingest, number 1, right? Getting the data in, because if you don't have data in there, what are you going to do, right? It's just it's a paperweight, right? There's no data. The second one is governance, right? You can set up security, you can manage access and manage flows. You can start looking at your data in different shapes. We're going to talk about different types of data that Snowflake can handle. I kind of mentioned access a little bit with governance, but what I really mean by access is almost immediately people, workers of data, are able to get into Snowflake via a URL, so you don't have to install anything on your machine. And then you're pretty much readily able to access through worksheets, writing SQL to access views and tables that you might have just loaded in, right? So easily taking, smallest case, a CSV, and loading that in to a table, and then starting to do some analysis on it with some basic SQL. And then the last one is scale, right? They promote it. A lot of the users, large companies that use Snowflake, we promote it. We think Snowflake is a near infinite scale system. Now, of course, somebody would tell you it's an infinite scale system, but we like to kind of play it safe a little bit and say it's a near infinite scale system. And pretty much what that means is, you can load loads of data, tons of data into the system. You can scale up the processor to meet the compute rather to meet demand. You can do that manually or automatically, and it'll just keep cranking on the data, and the more compute power that you give it, the faster it's going to be able to process some of those loads. And it seems like there's near infinite compute that you can access because it's on the cloud. So that makes it an exceptional system. One of the other things about Snowflake that's pretty amazing, and for the people who have worked with it for a little while, is really how they separated these three major tiers inside of the Snowflake architecture. And so the Snowflake architecture is really comprised of a storage area, a compute area, and a cloud services area. So you can think of like the top area of services is really, you know, the core management IP that Snowflake is bringing to the table. It's things like managing optimization, giving you management tools, security, giving you the ability to look at metadata, and doing things which have been pretty unique up to the point Snowflake introduced them, which was, you know, taking your data in your data warehouse or your cloud and sharing that data with other people. You know, and that seems to be kind of a stretch of the imagination for some folks who have never had a great use case around it. But you know, just the ability to say, we've got this large data set, we're a media company, we're an advertising company, we're a real estate company, and then in being able to say, I'm going to share this little sliver of our huge data, our data pool with a small sliver of the population that could be a customer, it could be another vendor. So that's an amazing bit of functionality. Then, like I mentioned before, we've got the compute layer, which is really all the processing of the data. And that's separate from the storage layer, which is where your data is actually stored. And so in essence, what that means is you could have you know, amazing amounts of data, terabytes, petabytes of data sitting somewhere, co-located somewhere, and then you can just massively leverage compute all across the cloud to work with that centralized stored data. And in legacy systems, you know, you really kind of co-located things, right? If you're on premise, you kind of had a single database server, and that database server was both the storage as well as the processor, right? And you know, as we evolved with database and data warehousing, we might have like, you know, a NAS or a SAN type system that stored the data, but it was still, you know, basically on the network, and it was limited to some degree. And so using the complete scalability of the cloud, that's what Snowflake has done, and separating these two things out have been a massive differentiator and for Snowflake and its customers. So again, along with unlimited performance and near infinite scale, right? You've got very little maintenance because it's in the cloud. They maintain everything for you. It's a platform as a service offering. There is really just the core platform, and that's what we found to be amazingly beneficial, is that you don't have to go looking all over the place for, you know, different, you know, aspects of the tool. It's really, you know, the centralized Snowflake interface and the tooling that goes around it, and you're able to do lots of work that you once had to go find multiple tools, multiple systems, to some degree even multiple vendors to process your data, right, and bring that data into information for your data workers. And then one of the other things we like about it is just the governing and security of data. There's the ability to secure data at different levels of granularity, and that also enables you to do the sharing of data because you can secure the data at these different levels. So if I think about what you can do with Snowflake, and some of you guys might have an opinion on this as well, and please throw something into the chat if you have a great use case for how you've used Snowflake or how you intend to use Snowflake. We'd love to hear about it and see what you guys are up to or have been up to. But when you look at data engineering, right, just the idea of saying, we have data, we need to do something with it. So from a data engineering perspective, that's about just moving the data around, doing something with that data, trying to turn it into information, building models and such. And one of the ways we look at this is called, what Snowflake is really doing is it's giving you an invention machine. People refer to Amazon AWS, Amazon Web Services, as an invention machine. They're basically giving you all the cogs, all the gears, all the belts, you know, all the motors, and it's really whatever your imagination you can think of, in this case, as it relates to data with Snowflake, you're able to go do it, right? You're able to go build that and make it happen. Another area of what you can do is start working and building, proverbial data lake, right? This idea of you've got kind of a central location for all your data stored, and then you can secure it, and you've got great performance of all different types of data. You can even build a data warehouse structure, and if you think about what a data warehouse is, it's really just the way your data is structured and put together, whether it be a data vault, which we like a lot, Data Vault 2.0, or if you're using more of a dimensional model, rather, Bill Inman, Ralph Kimball type structure. And so with any of those types of structures put on Snowflake, again, gets you to a situation where you can really scale that up. Historically, having worked with data warehouses for the last 20 years myself, there were times in those 2 decades where the amount of data just kind of hit a ceiling, and your data warehouses were kind of maxed out. And so I think that's almost no longer a case with the type of cloud computing Snowflake offers. Data science is another very popular one. Machine learning, data science, data mining, writing some amazing, pandas or data frames against the Snowflake data is possible. Lots of different connectors and APIs and clients for Python and Java and Go if you want to do any programmatic type work. And then the other one is data applications, right? So in general, there are some custom applications that companies build all the time in order to either input data, retrieve data. You think of them as web-based applications, and Snowflake can actually support those in a very meaningful way. And then the last one I mentioned before, which is just this great feather in the cap of Snowflake, which is data sharing. And if anybody's interested in that, we love talking that topic just because it takes and really just opens up kind of this community extension to your data. And it actually, data sharing actually invites additional business models into an organization. So there's quite a few companies that have actually are starting to turn, you could almost like return on investment, right? Turn profit on the data they're able to share through Snowflake. One of the companies we've worked with in the past was a real estate company, large real estate, commercial real estate company, and they've been collecting data for decades about real estate markets all over the country. They use it internally, but they really saw that as intellectual property at first, and they didn't want it. But then once they, we taught them about, hey, you could actually share that data, and then you could actually give slivers of that data and charge a potential customer for that data. And so now they actually have a return on investment. As a matter of fact, like any cost that they're paying for their data cloud is covered by them, selling their data to other customers. They've created an entirely new revenue channel with that, all the while staying very governed and secure with their data, keeping everything private and safe as far as the PII information and such. One of the other key things you might have heard about with Snowflake is this idea of unstructured data. And if you talk to any of the purists out there about data in general, you will hear them talk about, oh, there's no such thing as unstructured data, right? All data has to have some structure to it. And that's, in my opinion, very much true. If you look at a CSV file, you go into Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or something like that, or like a workbook, you've got rows and you have columns, right? That is a structure, rows and columns. If you look at some of the other data that's out there, like JSON data, which is extremely popular on the web these days, or YAML data or XML data, that also has structure. It's not a table structure. It might not be full rows and columns, but there's structure to it, which means it can be parsed, it can be defined. And so one of the great things that Snowflake has done with this is they've created a very unique data type. So instead of a string or a varchar, they've actually created one called a variant. And the variant data type allows really any type of semi-structured or unstructured data to be loaded into it. And it has a plethora of use cases. As a matter of fact, Snowflake is one of the tools, it could be the only tool, that allows you to easily parse the JSON data that's loaded into a variant column and parse it almost like you're using some sort of Python or Java XPath, if you're familiar with that type of coding, parser inside with the SQL of a rows and column structure. It's highly impressive, and if you haven't tried that, I do suggest you play with that a little bit, or find a blog or a video on it. I think we actually might have a blog or video on it, and it's worth checking out. So just know that this structured and semi-structured, unstructured data in Snowflake can live side by side. And if you haven't really incorporated Snowflake in your organization yet, I would almost, aside from all the other things that I've pointed out to this point, I would actually almost go here first, especially to some of the naysayers, and ask them to do a quick demo or a trial on web data or web log data, something that might really run your business, like Google Analytics type traffic, or logging traffic from errors on your website, company e-commerce or something like that, and see what this can do. And I think those naysayers are going to be quickly impressed, and you'll see that they kind of start leaning into Snowflake a little more because of that capability, especially when you join it with other data points. The other thing I like to talk about is getting data into Snowflake, right? We talked before, if you're not really getting data into Snowflake, it's kind of like a paperweight. And because of all the tooling it provides out of the box, you're able to find many different ways of getting your data from many of your distributed systems into Snowflake. So that could be through bulk loading means, continuous loading, streaming. These are some of the terms that are out there today that all kind of relate back to just the velocity and veracity of data that's in our market and in our lives today. One of the ways you can do this is using the command line interface. There's also some ability to load directly from really the worksheet, and I'll show that in a minute what that looks like. So basically the out-of-the-box user interface from Snowflake. And then you can always use one of the clients, like a Java client, a Python client, a Go client, to kind of connect your data and pull that in. So there's many different ways. You can even just upload the data from the interface if you have like CSV file or something like that. So many different ways. You can use Kafka, some of these other things. I think I've got a couple slides on that. And at the end of the day, it interfaces well with any of the other cloud sources. If you've already gone to AWS, maybe you're in Redshift, maybe you're using Aurora, maybe you're an Oracle shop, maybe you've got Microsoft Azure stood up because that's your company's first foray going into the cloud. You can bring any of that data into Snowflake from an ingress or an ingestion perspective. And you can do so, like I said, streaming, bulk load, micro batch, however you want to do it. You can get the data in there, and it's fast. Continuous loading is the other aspect people like to talk about. If you look at the CLI, I suggest everyone do this who's somewhere around the realm of being like a developer or a SQL coder, anywhere from an analytics engineer, data engineer. Definitely, if you haven't done this yet, it took me a while to do it. I'm actually a CLL guy. I love the terminal window and command line. If you haven't done this yet, I highly suggest you do it sooner rather than later. Like I said, I waited. I kind of regret it a little bit, but that's been a long time ago, so I'm up to speed. But the command line interface really just gives you this nice ability to work with the command line and quickly do things from your local machine without having to know Python or anything like that. There's lots of great tutorials out there, and it's a great way, especially if you're trying to get data in and you've got a little bit of experience with kind of coding or like running commands, or you can just follow instructions very well. I recommend using the Snow SQL command line interface. And if you do ever plan on becoming certified in Snowflake, Snowflake has a couple certifications like Snow Pro certification. They do ask a lot of these questions around the CLI and the way you can bring data into the system. So this is one thing I'd harp on. So one of the other key features is what they call Snowpipe. Again, this is all about getting data into the system, and there's a myriad of ways you can do it, as I mentioned. But one cool way you can do it is actually through your storage systems. So if you're already kind of in the cloud, or if you're not, all the major vendors, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, they all have these global storage buckets, and traditionally they're kind of used for, in data and data management is kind of idea of a data lake storage. And in Snowflake, you're able to use a service called Snowpipe. There's a couple different ways you can do it, but one of the ones we're just emphasizing here is something called Snowpipe. And Snowpipe is kind of a serverless kind of loader. You basically create a Snowpipe object inside of Snowflake, and then you point a few references, and it just allows you to kind of, as soon as you push data into your bucket, your S3, your cloud storage, then Snowpipe is kind of listening for that as a trigger, and it's able to pull in that data into a Snowflake database that you've chosen. So it's actually a really cool feature, and it's all about this idea of continuous loading. Making sure that the data that you have coming in from any of your logs or your processing or your IoT systems is seamlessly kind of brought into something that then can be actionable and usable. And so that's something that's pretty awesome. And one of the things about some of these, not all of them, but some of the features are billed. And what you're able to do is you're able to monitor all that billing by the the type of functionality you're using inside of Snowflake, which is really cool. There's also this concept of warehouses, which I didn't bring up in this intro. We're trying not to overwhelm too much, but I fear that we might have crossed that line a couple slides back. But one of the cool things is you're able to segment how your data is being processed. So you can create different warehouses inside of Snowflake, and you could assign a warehouse. And a warehouse, it confused me many years back when I first started with Snowflake, but a warehouse is really just a way to delineate a compute operator, right? An operation of compute, or a component of a compute. So I could create a warehouse for each segment of my business. I could have a warehouse for finance, and a warehouse for marketing, and a warehouse for just pure data loading. And as people are working and consuming the data and working with the data, they could be working off a specific warehouse that's assigned to them. And again, warehouse is just equating to compute power. And so when I look at the billing every month on how Snowflake is billing for my consumption of my company, I can see by compute segment, hey, finance is using the least, marketing is using the absolute must. They're charging us the most for our account every month. And standard data loading is not bad at all. And then I can start pulling levers and toggles based on that type of instrumentation that's provided. Just a few more slides here, and we'll talk about streaming data. Again, Kafka is big buzzword. Big buzzword these days. Kafka, getting data, kind of this pub sub sort of mechanism that's always looking for changes and moving that, based on that change, moving it to a different area. So we really kind of look at this again as kind of the continuous loading aspect when we're talking about Kafka. But the general idea is that either you're copying data in, you're using a REST API, you're using Snowpipe, with this auto ingest capability, and at the end of the day, it's all headed towards your Snowflake system, right? Your Snowflake database, your Snowflake storage. And so all is possible when it comes to moving data into Snowflake, and I think that's what they want, that's what they need, right? It's a paperweight if you're not getting data in there and you're actually using it. I use that term with love, paperweight. So let's talk about the environment real quick. If you guys haven't seen this before, I definitely encourage everyone to go get an account, and then you can simply go into Snowflake. I think they have like a trial to give you some free credits, and you can do that as your company admin, or you can do it as yourself if you're maybe just a data engineer or an analytics engineer. And it doesn't cost you anything right off the bat, right? And so you're able to go in there, play with the CLI, load data in, and you get this basic interface, and basically called the worksheet or the worksheets. And using the worksheets allows you to really write SQL code right off the bat from any of your objects that you see on the left-hand side. And by writing that SQL code down at the bottom where we have query results will appear here, that's where you're going to see your results. And so it's a pretty simple interface. And what I love about it is the simplicity of the interface. There's not a lot of bells and whistles, It's really straightforward. It's kind of, beauty in, beauty out, and you're able to get your results very quickly when you're using that interface. Simple example of seeing kind of code inside of the worksheet. This is just an example of creating a stored procedure, and we could talk about the differences in stored procedures versus what some people might know of stored procedures from using other systems. The one in Snowflake is a little bit different, but it's evolving over time. And I think the worksheets are easy to use. And one great thing is it's in the cloud. So as soon as you start typing something, it basically auto saves your work. You'll start writing a couple of SQL statements, and you terminate every SQL statement. If you're using a best practice, you terminate with a semicolon. And when you terminate with a semicolon, that allows you to run just like one statement at a time, or you could highlight everything and run and click the run button, or you could click on the checkbox to run all queries and hit the run button, and it runs everything kind of in a waterfall pattern. But as soon as you're done typing, it saves your work into the worksheet that you're in, and you can rename the worksheet right there. There really is not even a save button to click. It's really awesome, and its speed to delivery is amazing with the tool. They've even taken a next step, and they've created a newer version of the worksheet. So they call it the new user interface, or the new UI. And then the new user interface, personally, I'm not a fan of the new user interface. But the good thing is they give you the ability to just leverage the legacy interface. And I really hope that does not go away ever. And it could just be a little bit of a learning curve. I think the new interface has been there for about 4 to 6 months, maybe a little bit more. And I think it's a little bit more complex. But the one good thing about it is it gives a little bit more like a data wrangling, a little bit more of like a data discovery type aspect, not full blown. But for example, if you go look at a table, it'll automatically tell you that, hey, out of your 50 columns in this table, 3 of those columns are 86% null, and the rest of them are 100% filled with values, right? And this column is completely integers, or this column is 50% integers and 50% characters, right? So that's really cool. Gives you a little bit of extra access and telemetry into what you're doing and what you're going to be working with. So that's kind of cool. And then the other thing I think I like about it is, as you're working with it, you can kind of see descriptions of fields and things all at like one interface. Kind of nice. But if you're used to the old interface, I think there might be a little bit of bias there for the old one. Just a couple more screenshots, a new one. You can kind of do like a sample set of data, but you could do this in the old one as well. So, and I think one of the last few slides here is just talking about the marketplace. I mentioned previously about the real estate company example, and Snowflake is really trying to expand, and they've done a great job. I mean, but they're continuing to expand their marketplace and offering from other vendors, all different companies, finance, business, real estate, all sorts of different industries, providing data about market, economy, things of that nature. So simply by going to the marketplace, what this does is allows you as a data consumer, it allows you to kind of have like a shopping place for data that you might need to enrich your existing data. So maybe you want to go look at, as an example down here in the far right corner, actionable commercial real estate intelligence and analytics. So maybe you are a restaurant organization or retailer, and you've got dozens or hundreds of locations across the country, and you're moving your data into Snowflake. So you want to then say, well, let's see if we have any real estate data that's going to allow us to make better decisions about where we might buy a new property or build a new restaurant, whatnot. So you could just very easily click on the offering there from this company with the real estate data, and then with a few clicks, you're able to get access to the data that company's providing, and then merge that very seamlessly, very quickly into your existing data set as a prototype or a pilot, or even in a production state. And it acts as a technically a no copy situation, so where you're actually getting access to their real-time data, whatever they push out in that data set, or however their data plan is structured in the marketplace. So it's actually really, really cool, because it's creating more of a community feel with data, and data is the new currency, isn't it? So, all right, just wrapping up here. So just to recap, what's new in Snowflake? I think, well, recapping, I think Snowflake is amazing. It's awesome. It's an amazing platform for data. They call it the data cloud. And we can talk some more about what we just went over. But just a couple of new points for some folks who've been working with Snowflake for a while. A couple of things like the new UI, new worksheet interface. I showed that, a couple of screenshots of that. Again, it's going to be great. They're continuing to build. I'm kind of a fan of the older interface, just to kind of get in, get out sort of situation. They've also introduced organizations. So if you are a admin or a sysadmin or account admin for your Snowflake environment, this gives your group the ability to manage many different Snowflake accounts and kind of keep it simple, all within one account or one organization. So it's a very similar concept to what Amazon or Microsoft or any of these other large cloud vendors do today. Another thing, I didn't mention it, but Snowflake, their compute and their storage mainly work on the three largest vendors that are out there for cloud computing. So that's Google Cloud Platform, that's Microsoft Azure, and that's Amazon Web Services. So those three large cloud vendors, Snowflake, if I'm not mistaken in saying this, is really built on top of those architectures. And I think one of the reasons why that is because obviously those multi-billion-dollar companies of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, they had already created the infrastructure and started creating the infrastructure for all the cloud, decade plus ago. And so Snowflake has, created an amazing set of intellectual property around coordinating all those cloud regions and data centers and so forth, so that they all kind of work interoperably, specifically, within the same stack. So as a matter of fact, when you go create a new Snowflake account, at least they used to, it's been a while since I've done it, they actually ask you which vendor and which region do you want to be in? Do you want to be in the AWS vendor region or vendor, and which region do you want to be in for your Snowflake? If you pick Google Cloud, same thing with Microsoft Azure. And I think there's a benefit to that, actually. So one, they're able to leverage some of the specific offerings from each one of those vendors. So some might say that Amazon Web Services is better at like HIPAA compliance or FedRAMP, or name your new sort of compliance. Where Google Cloud Platform might be better at XYZ, right? And Microsoft might be better at something else. So if you're a company that's already started down the road of saying, hey, we've already started moving into Amazon or Google Cloud, then there's benefit to kind of create that affinity when you create your account with Snowflake. And so my point here on this bullet is that Snowflake is continuing to add more support and capability for Google Cloud Platform. I think Snowflake originally, when they came out, it was just on Amazon's footprint. So it was only, if you want to sign up for a Snowflake account years and years ago, it was only on Amazon. And then I think they moved to Microsoft and then Google Cloud Platform. I could have the last two backwards. And then more support for Apache Arrow. That gets a little technical, so I'll kind of skip over that one unless somebody's super technical, they want to talk about it. External functions, they will skip over that one. Tasks and streams, which is kind of cool. And then this last one, I bring this up, and I'll kind of wrap up here. We'll kind of get into kind of some Q&A stuff. But column level security. So I mentioned row level security is available for especially doing things like data sharing. But there are different levels of purchase for the Snowflake platform. So I can't remember all the names off the top of my head. There's only really three. But the last one is what they call the enterprise version. And there are certain features that are only available with the enterprise version. They just came out really with column level security, and that's in the enterprise version. That you can do amazing things without buying the enterprise version. A lot of our customers are just in the middle tier that we work with, and we kind of see that as a common tier, and you get loads of things. But there are just some tiny like enterprise level super kind of bleeding edge almost features that are available in enterprise. So just leave you with that. And then just wanted to kind of wrap up with, we are developers of what we call the Data Lake House platform, and we're currently accepting early access to that platform. So stop on by datalakehouse.io, and you can get early access to that platform as we get ready to release that next month. So just see if there's any questions from anyone, or if we're good to wrap up there on our first meetup. Sorry, that took a little longer than the 25 minutes I was hoping for. I'm like 15 minutes over that. But let's see. Any questions coming in from our chat? Nope. All right. Yeah, we still got quite a few people on. Jerry, Oscar, Kumar, Christy, Heather, Vitra. Okay.
Sandeep asked if there's a trial version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, Sandeep, yeah, they do have a trial version. I should have put the Snowflake computing link here. But yeah, if you go to snowflake.com, and hey, I can actually even pull it up on the screen here for you. All right. Thank you. All right, so this is what we see here, right? So we've got start for free. Once you click on that link, I might already be logged in. Yep, there we go. So this is once you sign up, just with your name, email, company. I think there's one step beyond that, and then you can see here it gives you basically $400 worth of free usage when you test drive, which is a lot. I mean, unless you're bringing in like loads, I mean, like terabytes, petabytes of data, you're not going to use that up, super quickly. So you'll be able to play with your account for a good amount of time. Okay. All right, what's the background of professionals now working in Snowflake with system admin and systems engineering background? Yeah, I think if you're, Oscar, if you're kind of a system admin guy or person and, engineering background, I think the one key that we're seeing today is what they call like a data engineer or an analytics engineer, is like the basic things like general understanding of a database, relational database management systems, SQL. I'm telling you, if you really just have a decent grasp on SQL, that's going to get you, pretty far with Snowflake in itself. Snowflake also has amazing training. They've done a great job making sure that their partners are trained, but also individuals that are looking for understanding the Snowflake platform in general. There's a lot, like I just showed you one page there, guides.snowflake.com. Lots of great training material there. Read the manuals, watch the videos, go through the training, and you should be fine with that, especially if you have a SQL background. Yeah. The other thing, if you go up a notch in anything to do with like database or data warehouse design, the next one that I personally prefer the skill is what I call data modeling. And data modeling is it's a higher level skill, I think, than just writing SQL, because that gets you into understanding structures, formation of relationships between the data. And that goes back to things like, third normal form, fourth normal form, those types of things. You can always query some of those things. But thanks for some good stuff. Okay, awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight during this meetup. I'd love to hear back from everyone. I'm trying to think that we get some photos of the group. I don't know if everyone else shared their video. I think most people are just kind of video neutral there, and that's okay. But yeah, looking to understand what we can do better. This is again the Carolinas Snowflake. We're happy to welcome anybody to join our virtual sessions for sure. We've got, I think, someone from Texas. I didn't get any other feedback of where other folks were from if they weren't in the Carolinas. But love to hear from you. Drop us a line. Tell us what you want to see, what you want to hear, and we will scramble to put it together. We're going to host another one in a 1 month, and hopefully some fresher, newer, cooler content. And look forward to you guys joining us then.